Hello and welcome back to the Of Clay and Stone podcast. We're your host, Josh Santana.
And Jocelyn.
And today we're going to be continuing the series that we started 2 weeks ago, the series titled Modern Idols, The Things That Will Never Fulfill You. And whether you're a Christian or not, I think if you listen to this, you're going to really see that a lot of us are driven, whether it's because of things that we just desire naturally or because of what society or culture tells us, but we're driven to pursue certain things. But the thing that we have to come to realize is a lot of the things that these idols promise are just empty promises. And when we're talking about idols, we don't necessarily, again, mean statues or wooden figures that you bow down to like people did in the Old Testament times and in ancient cultures, but just anything that you're willing to pursue to the point where you think your happiness is dependent on this thing, that you need this thing for life, that it drives your actions, your emotions, that when this certain thing that you want is threatened, then you feel like your life is ending. So this is what we're talking about. And today we're talking about specifically the idol of money. And I know a lot of people have probably heard something like this, but we're going to try to explain it in a different way that'll just maybe seem a little fresh to some of you. We're not going to be just talking about money's bad, because it's not. It's just a thing. It's when you idolize money when it becomes bad. So we're going to be talking.
So just sorry, I'm like cutting you off, sure. But again, like good things can become godlike things.
Right.
You know, like not everything is bad. It's just, again, how much weight you put on like that specific thing. Because idols can be very good things, like family and relationships and money and, you know, education, just to name a few. Sorry.
Right. So we're not going to be just talking about and bashing money, because that's obviously not constructive and it wouldn't even be accurate. We're just going to be talking about two stories about two disciples that followed Jesus, and how their love for money or their love for certain things is what drove them down that path to destruction. And they just kept chasing it and changing themselves to people that they didn't want to be. If you haven't checked out our last series, we talked about just what the gospel is, and we laid a good foundation on what that is. So check that playlist out if you want to. And last week we explained what Palm Sunday, Good Friday, and Easter were. So if you're a little curious about what that is, make sure to check that out. So without further ado, let's get into what we're going to be talking about today. So today we're going to be talking about the first disciple of Jesus, maybe the obvious one for some of you Christians listening, but we're going to be talking about Matthew. Now, before he was a disciple, many of you probably know that he was a tax collector. And if you grew up going to Sunday school or grew up going to any type of church gatherings, even me, who didn't end up going to church that often growing up, even I heard the stories. Matthew was a tax collector, and tax collectors are bad. But I don't think a lot of us grasp how bad they really were. They weren't just people that were just getting money and just doing their jobs, and people didn't like them because of that. There's more to it. At this time in history, because we're talking about the New Testament, Rome was in charge of pretty much the whole known world at this point. They had a huge empire, and they relied on taxing their conquered people heavily so that they could support their wars, other projects, architecture, all those amazing things that you have seen them do. So they needed a lot of money, and they would conquer people. They wouldn't just destroy them. They would try to assimilate them into their culture, but they also needed to get money from them. Yet they didn't have enough people to tax every single city, every single conquered people, because it was the largest empire known. And they also didn't want to risk the lives of Romans and their soldiers because they saw them as better. So when it came to taxing people, what they would do is they came up with this little sneaky plan, which, I mean, whether you think it's smart or not, that's up for you to decide. But they hired local people from the conquered territories to tax their own people. That way, they didn't have to spread their Roman citizens thin or worry too much if those tax collectors were killed or if they were hated. It didn't matter. They were using the conquered people and turning them against each other. And they were staying out of it, but all the while taking all the money and all the credit. So you might be wondering, how would they do that? How would if Rome, who was the big bad guy at this point for a lot of these conquered people, if they came, waged war on you, killed almost everybody in your area, especially like the men that were in war, how would they convince you now to help them? And the way they did this is that they asked for a minimum from these people to be given to them as tax collectors, but then they allowed them to demand as much as they wanted and keep the extra as long as Rome got the minimum. So just to make this sound a little more simple, if like I was hired to be a tax collector, Rome would come up to me and say, "Hey, just make sure you get us $1,000 every month. But if you want to charge the people of this town $10,000 and you keep 9,000 for yourself, as long as we get the 1,000, we'll turn a blind eye and you can do whatever you want." So as you can tell, a lot of these people that would have been poor, would have been from these other areas they were oppressed by these Romans. This was their big chance to become really, really rich. So they weren't just a little rich. They weren't just well off. They were probably the wealthiest people in their countries, in their towns, in their cities. So Matthew was one of these hired people. He was convinced that money was going to be this amazing thing where he could get whatever he wanted. So he chose to betray his own country. He chose to betray his own family and his God, all just to get rich because he thought that is what he most desired. So to everyone else, he was seen as this traitor. He was seen as literal human scum, as the lowest of the low, because loyalty to your family, people, and God was considered the highest value in their society. Like, you do not betray your people. You love your family. You honor your parents. You do what you have to do for your country, your people, and your God. So becoming a tax collector you were not seen as human at that point because you betrayed the highest value of the society. And not only was not being loyal to your people like bad, but now he was working for the bad guys that were daily torturing their own people, killing his own family and friends, doing all that, oppressing them, taking away their way of life. So it would have been bad enough if he had just said, "I don't want to be a Jew anymore. I just want to just live my own life, and I don't want to care about my parents." But he went further than that and said, "I'm also going to help the bad guys that are oppressing us and killing us, torturing us, taking away our way of life." So again, he was seen as the worst of the worst, not even human, not worthy of being saved, not worthy of being loved by God, just cursed in every single way possible. Do you want to add anything? No? All right. So to everyone else, sorry. So Matthew was blinded by this promise of money, as you can tell. He was willing to do whatever it took and betray everyone just to obtain the promise that money gives. After a while, he, like most people, when they get into perpetual sin, and by that I mean like sin that you just constantly do without feeling like you need to repent. Because everyone sins and stumbles, but as long as they realize that as Christians and they repent and then keep daily walking with Jesus, you're going to fall every once in a while, but that's okay. But perpetual sin is where I'm just going to keep sinning and I don't care, even if you consider yourself a Christian. So like most people that get into that mindset, he probably got numb after a while. He just kept pursuing money, thinking if I can just get a little more, then it'll finally be enough. But it was never enough, obviously. And he just kept taking people's homes, all of their savings, and he sent people into slavery and jail to pay off debts, all to feed his insatiable appetite. He was probably like sending his own grandma into jail because she couldn't pay off whatever money he was wanting to get from her. So I mean, like, as you can tell, this was a despicable thing to do, and he was really at rock bottom. And that is why Jesus approaches him. And that's why Jesus makes a big deal to hang out with tax collectors. Because to everyone in this society, they were seen as the people that were furthest away from salvation. There was no hope for them. There was no love for them, no forgiveness. God could never want to do anything with them, just be happy. But God would just be happy to like kill them and send them to hell. So that's why God that's why when Jesus was on his earthly ministry, he would spend so much time with tax collectors to show them that we're all equally far away from salvation, but through Jesus, we can all be brought near. And that's what he was trying to show. And in Luke 12:15, Jesus says, And he went on his way to say to them all, "Watch out and guard yourselves from every kind of greed, because your true life is not made up of the things you own, no matter how rich you may be." So that's Luke 12:15, in case anyone wants to follow that up later. He's warning again. He saw Matthew and all these other tax collectors. They were chasing money because they thought, I just need more, I just need more, I just need more. But no matter how much they pursued it, they would always just keep being empty and just doing worse and worse things. And that's why he says, your life is not made up of those things. No matter how much you obtain, no matter how much you pursue it, it's never going to be enough. And you see that Matthew chased money, again, not because it looked nice, because, I mean, some people will stop there and just say, you're just greedy, you just want money, you just want to have things. But it goes deeper than that. It really does. Because he most likely thought if he could get a certain amount, then he could have power or control or comfort or security or the love and approval of others. Because money in itself is not a bad thing, like we said in the beginning. It's the idolizing of money that is bad, because it turns money into a vehicle to try to feed other idols. If you you want to say something?
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. And I think that Matthew's, like, I guess, would you say like account story? I don't know.
Sure.
I think it may not seem like it's relatable, but it truly is. Just because I think we live in a society where we're pushed to, like, try to gain financial security. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
like it's very driven on, again, like, not that education is bad or, again, money is bad. It's just, again, that it goes to the extent where, like, people have, like, life crisis or, like, crises if they don't obtain, like, the type of education they wanted, and, like, you know, and
Yeah.
they're not making the amount of money that they figured. And again, like, it's just, money is just a very tricky thing. It's a very tricky thing.
Right.
And so there definitely has to be a balance between being a good steward of money and just realizing that, like, money in itself, it's not going to fulfill you, but it can be used for good too.
Right. And
So
as some of you may know, because we said it in a couple other episodes, I'm a youth pastor, and I even talked about this with our high school and middle school students. And obviously, none of them have jobs or careers. Maybe some of them have allowances, but the reason I thought it was so important to talk about this, because most youth pastors would probably just skip it because it doesn't seem relatable, was because there's all these idols. There's control, comfort, security, power, approval, love, money. But money is kind of the only one that is just tied into all the other ones. It's a slippery slope. If you chase money, it's not because you just want money. If you chase money, it's because you wanted to feed all these other idols. So if you start getting greedy, then you really need to be on guard and watch yourself, because it's not that hard to go from I want money to now this money is going to feed my want for power, control, comfort, security, love, approval, all of that.
yeah.
So you can see how in a world that was so unstable, at least to Matthew's time, because they were able to rule themselves for like 100 years before the Romans came, and then suddenly everything changed. Everything was so unstable. So I'm not trying to give him a break, but because everything in his life was so overthrown suddenly, it can be seen maybe why the reason he became a tax collector was to try to get some control, some stability, some security, and also to get power, because he felt probably that I don't know, demasculated, whatever that word is, because Rome had taken over, and he was probably the man of his house. But without getting it's a little conjecture though.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that could add to it is also pride.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know. I don't know, and, like, this isn't just something that's, I guess you would, what most Christians would say, like, that only happens in the world, but like it happens in the church too.
All the time.
You know? I mean, the church that I grew up in, like, there was definitely, like, people were definitely willing to flaunt money to one up one another, you know? Like, and again, they would use money as a vehicle to feed their pride, to feed their ego, to make their ego and make much of themselves, you know? Like, I remember, like, specifically growing up and like people again, like, having, like, spending a lot of their money in like designer things,
Yeah.
even though they probably didn't have the money to spend on designer things. Like, the money could have gone to something better,
Right.
but they did it to flaunt it.
Yeah.
It wasn't even like, there's a difference between like wanting something nice because you worked hard for it, and you, like, it's not something that you want to flaunt, but it's something that you just like and enjoy. But it's another thing to buy things because either you want somebody to be envious of it,
Mm-hmm.
or you want to flaunt it and you want to show, like, hey, you know, like, I do have the cash to spend on this, like X, Y, and Z. And that could go from, well, basically like any material thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't have to be a bag. It doesn't have to be clothes. It could be your house. It could be the type of vehicle that you drive, or like the type of furniture that you buy, or, you know, we just get caught up in those things.
Right. And I guess what it comes down to again is, what are you pursuing to get your ultimate comfort, security, and all that? Is it any of these idols that we've been talking about, or is it Jesus? Because it wasn't until Jesus showed up on the scene that Matthew, he could finally see that Jesus was enough for him, and that he was finally broken of this blindness in pursuing money. Jesus showed up and said, I can give you security. I can give you acceptance. I can give you joy. I can give you peace. I'm always in control, and I work for the best of those who love me, so you don't have to feel the need to control everything. Only Jesus could fulfill all the empty promises that money could never fulfill, or any of those idols that we see. So when we talk about Christians, or, you know, quote, Christians with air quotes, whether they are or not is, you know, discern that. If you see their actions are in all those things that you were just talking about, Jocelyn, then it doesn't seem like they are resting in Jesus. It doesn't seem like they are pursuing him, or at least, you know, accepting that he's pursued them to the point of the cross and resting in that.
Yeah.
Instead, they're pursuing all these other things and putting God second or third or fourth. And that's the sad part, because we made a series, or not a series, but a episode a couple weeks ago, titled "Aren't Christians all like hypocrites? Aren't Christians all judgmental? Aren't Christians all this?" And what we came to the conclusion of is that there's a lot of fake Christians out there. There's a lot of people that wear the badge, that just do the act. They wear the mask, but only a small number of them actually understand the gospel, actually rest in the gospel, and are actually growing to become more like Christ. And the rest are just hurting this, you know, some of the unbelievers in this world, hurting each other, and then everyone blames Jesus because of it. And it's sad. But that's why it's so important to remember these things, to remember that idols can't fulfill, and to truly rest in the gospel and truly rest in who Jesus is. So I guess just to continue our message really quick, we finished talking about Matthew, and you saw how despicable he was, how bad tax collectors really were in their day, how hated they were, how Jesus specifically hung out with them because most people saw them as the worst of the worst, the people furthest away from salvation. And Jesus was making a point that they weren't that far from salvation. All they needed was Jesus. Something else that's crazy to understand, because when you talk about Matthew, you have to talk about another disciple. His name is Simon, and if you know Simon, he was considered a zealot. And normally he would have been the arch nemesis of a tax collector. So before encountering Jesus, what a zealot was, and specifically Simon, he was somebody that got all of his identity from being very Jewish, and he tried to find security and control by constantly trying to encourage the killing, or by personally killing or overthrowing anybody that was threatening the Jewish way of life. So he thought that if we can just get all these Romans out of here, if we can just get all these tax collectors out of here, if we can just get all these people that aren't Jewish out of here, then we can finally have peace. Then we can finally have joy, security, control. I mean, not to say anything bad about Donald Trump, but like if you put it onto their times, they were trying to make Israel great again. They were saying we have to change everything, get back to the roots. All these other people, it's all their fault. I mean, I don't know if that's what Trump did or not. I'm not trying to make
It's not political.
It's not political. I'm not trying to make it political.
Example.
It's just an example. He was saying, let's make Israel great again, basically. And the problem, the scapegoat, is the Romans. The problem, the scapegoat, is all that. And so you can see, like, if he was on social media, he would be one of those people with like an American flag background with eagles and all that stuff. Like whatever you picture as the stereotype of somebody that's super patriotic, that was him, but Jewish. So obviously he would have been the arch nemesis of a tax collector, somebody that.
I just want to interject.
Sure.
Because again, like, it's not wrong to be proud of where you come from.
Right.
But again, to the point where it drives your identity and that's all that you are, and that, like, that's where you find, again, like, that's where that has a lot of weight, like more weight than what Jesus calls you to be. Like, that's what's wrong. So I just want to make that clear, just because, I think what you said could people could take it the wrong way.
Right.
And so it's not that, like, that example wasn't given with wrong intentions. It's to make the point. Right.
There's nothing wrong with being patriotic, but just don't make sure all your security, comfort, control, power, pride, all that comes from that, because it should be coming from Jesus instead. But anyways, like what I was trying to say is, this guy who was super Jewish and super proud of being Jewish and blamed all these outsiders, the Romans, the tax collectors, he would have been an arch enemy of Matthew, somebody who was a Jew who betrayed his own people and is now working with the enemy and destroying their way of life. He was the one that was bankrupting all of his own family, and even Simon the Zealot's family, probably throwing Simon and Zealot's like cousins in prison too, or slavery for debts, doing all that. So if they had met in person before Jesus, Simon would have probably killed Matthew. But again, his vision of, if we can just get all these tax collectors and Romans out of here, then we can have peace, joy, security, control, all that. It wasn't a true vision, because as we've seen, if any of you have read the Old Testament, when Israel would rule themselves, they would only do it for a little bit. Then they would mess up, start worshiping other gods, doing all this crazy stuff, getting into a lot of immorality, and then they would end up getting conquered because of their idolatry. So even if Simon could somehow get all the Romans out and all the tax collectors out, the problem wasn't the outsiders. It was just humans in general, that they were idolizing everything else besides Jesus. And it wasn't until Jesus showed up and met Simon when Jesus became enough for him too, where he didn't feel the need to have to control everything or chase security, for the same reasons that Matthew stopped chasing money to get control and security. Just like how Matthew was chasing money as a vehicle to feed his approval, power, success, all those things that he was hungry for, Simon was doing the same thing, just with his pride for his nationality. He thought, if we can do all these, then I can also get the same things that Matthew wants from money. And through Jesus, these once arch enemies, they were able to call themselves brothers. They would love each other like brothers. They wouldn't hate each other for their past way of life or anything, because they were both resting that Jesus was enough. And the one guy that never wanted to leave Israel, the one guy that was like, Israel and the Israelite people are the best in the world, every other country sucks, basically, he would end up spending the rest of his life in India after he got saved. He would never went back to Israel. He spent his life in India, and he was killed in India for preaching the gospel. And then Matthew would die as a poor man. He lost everything that he had, and he would end up preaching the gospel and dying as a poor man. But both of them ended up being fulfilled. Both of them ended up being happy because they were resting in the one thing that could only truly fulfill them. Jesus was enough. The gospel was enough, because all of us were created specifically to be in relationship with God. And Jesus, through his death and his perfect life, has made a way for us to be reconciled to a relationship with God. So only in a relationship with God and resting in that can we truly be fulfilled, because only then are we fulfilling the purpose that we've been created to fulfill. And chasing any other things that God has created, or any other things that the culture tells us that we should pursue, that's just going to we're just going to end up empty. We're going to end up wanting more. So I don't know if you're listening, if you're younger, if you don't have a job, or if you just have like a part-time job, or in high school or in college, or if you're older. So I don't really know how you can relate to this message about money, but we can see how it can sneak up on you. The love of money can sneak up on you as either those of you that are younger are going to grow older, or if some of you may have learned the hard way if you're already a little older, like our age. And it's not hard to see why people pursue it. But just remember, if you ever do feel money controlling your emotions or your actions or happiness, that it's most likely because there's something deeper to that idol. It's not just money in itself, but there's something deeper there. Because the idol of money is just that vehicle often that feeds other idols, such as security, approval, comfort, control, and power.
Yeah. And I just want to add something else. Like, again, money is not a bad thing.
Right.
It's not, because God can use money to do good things for his kingdom.
Right.
I've met very generous people who have that were blessed with having some type of wealth, but it doesn't have a hold on their heart, and they're very generous and they want to use that for the kingdom.
Right.
But then again, on the other side of the spectrum, there's people that don't view it that way, and they just want it to be self-serving.
Yeah.
And I think a big lesson that I learned from my parents and I learned from the Bible is that money can be easily given. God could bless you with money, or you can earn a lot of money, but ultimately that money can be taken away too.
Mm-hmm.
But again, whether you're blessed with money or that money's taken away, the most important thing is knowing that God is ultimately the better thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like my life and my parents' lives, I could see that, for those of you who don't know me, I come from, I would say I'm first generation. My dad came from Mexico having nothing, and he met Jesus. We struggled a lot financially, a lot. I think I was a little aware of it, and I could remember some of the struggle. I remember living in my grandparents' garage for like a season, and there was a lot of hardship. And even then, like, we weren't in despair because we knew whose hands we were in, And so for my parents, it probably was very difficult for them, but again, they had faith in Jesus. They knew who God was, and they knew that regardless of what they had in their bank account, that God would sustain them, that God would fulfill them, And yeah, it's beautiful to have that comfort that's never going to fade.
Yeah.
Because material things, money always fades, but God always stays constant. He always stays faithful. His character never changes. And like, he loves us, and he tells us not to worry about those things. He calls us to be good stewards of what he gives us.
Right.
But again, like, when we don't have, because some people, because of X, Y, and Z, maybe they don't. Maybe like money is a struggle, like financially it is a struggle. But there's that hope and that like comfort in knowing that like God will provide the way that he provides for like the birds, Like they don't worry about tomorrow because God provides for them. And so it doesn't have to be a thing that we're constantly stressed about. We could leave it in God's hands and just be like, God, like, whether you have money, whether you don't have money, either way, I'm good because I'm in your hands and you take care of me and you love me. And, like everything that we go through is for his glory and to make him known. So that's just a little side tangent.
No, for sure. That leads us into the next verse that I was going to read. Matthew 6:19-21. Again, that's Matthew 6:19-21. It says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So a lot of people read this and they think, I need to stop trying to get things in this life, and I just need to focus on getting rewards in heaven. But honestly, I don't believe that this verse is talking about gaining rewards for heaven, because that's, again, that wouldn't be, you wouldn't be worshiping God for the right reasons if you're just worshiping him because you can get things from him.
Yeah.
Because he should be your ultimate reward. But what I believe it is talking about in this context, because based on the other passages around it, is that it's talking about making Jesus and the gospel your one and only treasure. Because if your relationship with God is the most important thing in your life, then nothing will be able to take away your joy, your security, your peace, your fulfillment, all those things. When you chase idols, these things that will never fulfill you, you're never going to get joy, security, peace, fulfillment, control, pride from them. Maybe you will for a season, but then you'll feel empty again. You'll feel thirsty again, and you'll need more and more and more. But when it comes to Jesus and the gospel and this good news, all you have to do is rest it. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to pursue it. You just rest in it. You make your home in it. You make a permanent establishment in it. And then you just relax and you enjoy it. So if you want to have joy and security and peace, fulfillment, and identity that is unshakable, then turn to Jesus and rest in the gospel, whether you're a Christian or not, because you can be a Christian and then not understand the weight of the gospel. So make that weight, understand that true weight. And I guess that's pretty much what I had to say. Do you have anything to add?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered it pretty well.
All right. Well, this has been the Of Clay and Stone podcast. Next week, we'll be talking about a different idol, things that will never fulfill you. And, well, I have been your host, Josh Santana.
I'm Jocelyn.
And we'll see you next time. Make sure to subscribe for new content.